Those eyes disguise our hide. Bright lights decide the fight. Your heart beats fast despite the truth that love is blind. I just wanna feel anything.
Welcome to the Clean and Filthy podcast with your host, Matthew M.
Hello and welcome back to the Clean and Filthy podcast, where we are clean and serene with a filthy mind in between. I am your host, Matthew M., and I am an addict in recovery. Welcome back, everybody. Cannot believe we are on episode 14. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for all of the continued support. As I always say, I couldn't do it without y'all. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Before we go any further, as I always say, we got to give a shout out to our episode sponsor. It is Etc. by Emily. If you are looking for any kind of event, party planning, party staffing, contact her. Or if you're looking for a job, I know they are currently hiring. All of her information is listed below in the description. Also, huge shout out to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and Mad Decent Records for giving us the privilege of using the amazing song Anything as our theme music for the Clean and Filthy podcast. All of the download, stream information right below in the description, so definitely check it out. Hopefully you guys vibe with that song as much as I do, because I'm telling you, when I hear that song come on, I'm just, whoo, I'm ready to go. It's a good day. Anytime I hear that, I'm feeling great. Also, huge thank you to our VIP supporters. We got a new one this week. These are the people who are giving donations on Patreon, helping build this product. And as I said before, anything that comes in on Patreon goes right back into this podcast to help develop our production value, help get us better equipment, help, provide a better product that will be more attractive to more people, because the more attractive it is, the more it gets shared, the more people we can help. So thank each and every one of you who is supporting. And they are Cindy, Stephanie, Shar, Clint, and Alex. Thank you all for your support. And as I always say, if you want to support this podcast, Patreon is the best way to do it. You can go to the Patreon link that is listed on the website. Simply go to www.cleanandfilthypodcast.com. In the top right corner with all the social media links is the link to Patreon. Once you get there, make a donation, and you will get one of these awesome Clean and Filthy podcast stickers sent directly to you so you can display it and hopefully help us grow. Also, in the future, we're going to be making up some merch, and our VIP contributors will have the first opportunity to purchase the merchandise. So we aren't quite there yet with the merch, but it's coming. It's coming. So be on the lookout for it. And we'll definitely be giving some notifications of it. Again, thank you, everybody who is checking this podcast out. I know each week we're getting more and more first-time listeners, and hopefully, after this week, you won't be a first-time listener anymore. So shout out to everybody who's here on Twitter, who got my notifications on Facebook, everybody who's been here from the beginning. I love all of you. Thank you all for helping me on this journey. I couldn't do it without y'all. So again, thank you, everybody. And if you're here and you're checking us out and you like what you're hearing, please make sure to give us a good rating or give us an appropriate rating, whatever you feel the rating would be on any of the podcast directories that we are listed on. That really helps us grow. And if you're able to, please make sure to like us and subscribe to us on Facebook. We still need a few more subscribers on Facebook. So if you have, even if you don't use Facebook, but you have an account, please head over to our Facebook page. Throw us a subscribe, throw a couple likes if you like what you hear. And as always, please share us. The way we are going to grow as an independent podcast is through word of mouth, is through people like y'all sharing this podcast with somebody, getting us out there to other people. So please, if you don't follow us on social media, head to the website, click all the social medias up at the top there, like us on all of them, follow us on all of them, subscribe to us, tweet us, retweet us, mention us, whatever you can do to help grow this product and this podcast, please do. So if you hear something you like, please help others hear it as well. And if you hear something you don't like, contact me. I would love to know and hear feedback from people. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback since this process began, but I also really appreciate negative feedback or notes. I know I am not the best at this. I know I have a lot to learn and a large way to grow and become a better host of this podcast. And the way I'm going to do that is hearing other people's experience with this product and what you guys feel. So please send that over to us. And again, thank you for all of the support. Really, really appreciate it. And if you're new, hopefully you won't be new when it comes to next week. So if you are listening to this podcast on a directory and you would like to be a part of the live stream, head on over to YouTube. We live stream new episodes every single Tuesday, 5 p.m. Arizona time, live on YouTube the episodes available for download later on that night, wherever you consume your podcasts. So if you're, right now on YouTube, say what's up. We got a good group of people that hang out in the live stream. We get a little chat going back and forth. I personally love being able to go back and read the chat afterwards. It's a lot of fun, and it builds that community of listeners and of viewers, and it's just a lot of fun. So if you are on YouTube right now, what up, though? Get that chat popping. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel so that you get the notification whenever we go live. Make sure to throw us a like and, try to get the message out there. And if you are watching on YouTube and you don't mind, head on over to wherever you consume your podcasts from. Throw us a download. Really helps our numbers go up. We're getting to that next milestone in terms of downloads, and it feels pretty cool. And I'm really excited. And again, my super OCD addict behavior of like refresh. See how many downloads we got now is kind of coming out. But it's okay. It's okay. That's allowed. So please help add to that. So before we go into our first segment, we got to talk about what we are, what we do, and what we don't do. Again, my name is Matthew M. I am an addict in recovery, and I am your host here on the Clean and Filthy podcast. We are a 12-step recovery-based podcast. As I said, I am an addict, and I have some experience, strength, and hope on recovery. So that's what we do here. But I am not speaking from any point of authority on any specific fellowship. I want to make sure to stay in line with the traditions, and I want to make sure not to speak from any kind of place of authority or give my direct opinion about a specific 12-step fellowship or a specific treatment center or a specific, recovery residence or anything of that regard, because I don't want to violate traditions. But if you have any questions about different meetings in Arizona or around the world, or if you have questions about treatment, or you have questions about, specific fellowship, please contact me. You can reach me at Matthew@CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com or on any social media, and I would be more than happy to address those things. But we will not be speaking about those specifics on this podcast. We will not be talking about, what my home group is or what fellowship I go to or anything like that, because I don't want to violate any traditions, and I want to make sure that this is as enjoyable for everybody across every area of fellowship of recovery as possible. So this is going to be an adjunct to recovery. The whole point of this podcast is to help people understand more about recovery, about addiction, about the things that addicts go through on a day-to-day basis. So if you are an addict in recovery, you're right where you should be. If you're an addict who's not in recovery and maybe you have some questions, you're right where you should be. Even if you're somebody who has no direct connection that you know of to addiction, hang out. Maybe you'll hear something you like, because at the end of the day, the point of this is to grow knowledge and community about recovery, to help everybody and anybody who has been affected by addiction in any way. And that is most people in the world today. Sometimes we might not realize it, but that is most people. So that is what we're here for. This should not replace going to a 12-step meeting. This should not replace calling your sponsor or working steps with that sponsor or being of service to that fellowship. It should not replace those things. But it should be something that allows us to be a community and a way to help. Because really, that is all I care about at this point. I want to be able to help people. I want to give back what was so freely given to me. And doing this podcast helps with that. So again, that's what we do. That's what we don't do, just to make sure that's out there. At the end of the day, I am here speaking with my experience, strength, and hope, and some of my opinion on what has worked for me in recovery and what I do each day, and all of us, do each day to continue one day at a time in recovery. So that's what we do. That's what we don't do. If you're new, stick around. You might hear something you like. As I always say, recovery is about becoming a better human being. It has nothing to do with the drugs anymore. Maybe that's what it was when it started, but where it's at now is it's about becoming a better human being. So now that we got that out of the way, let's get into our first segment.
Let's head to the lab for some R&D. Recovery and development.
That's right. We are here in the lab for our first segment. This is entitled Recovery and Development. This is the part of the show where each week we discuss a different step, principle, step, tradition, concept, or spiritual principle within, the 12-step recovery model. And we discuss, the basics of it, how it applies within our daily lives, and the things that we do to try to keep it fresh in our minds. So we've already gone through the 12 steps, and we are officially on episode 14, which is still mind-blowing to me, which means we are on tradition number 2. So if you haven't heard the steps or tradition 1, I highly suggest checking those out. Our episodes are in order for a reason because the steps are in order for a reason. So we covered steps 1 through 12 on episodes 1 through 12, and now episode 13 starts us on the traditions. So as we talked about last week with tradition 1, the traditions are a lot more in depth. They are a lot deeper than the things that we talk about within step work. Step work, is very tied into our active addiction and that initial freedom from active addiction. Tradition work gets a lot deeper. It opens things up a lot more on the group level, on service level, but all those things can apply outside of recovery. So again, if you aren't an addict and you're confused as to, why you're here right now, just stick around. Maybe you'll hear something you like. And if you do, please, make sure to share that with others. So maybe they'll hear something they like. So tradition 2, what does it say? Tradition 2 says, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. So there's a lot of things to unpack. Before we get into the unpacking, we always got to talk about what the spiritual principles are of this tradition. So obviously, first one, it's right in the writing of the tradition itself. The first one is conscience. And we're going to get to that a little bit more. But we also have to have trust. We have to have the principle of selfless service. We need to talk about love and unity like we talked about last week. Last week was all about unity. If you didn't check out Tradition 1, head back right now, listen to it, then you'll have a better understanding of what we're growing on here within the unity. We also have to look at a purpose. And finally, the spiritual principle of anonymity. So before we even start breaking down the first half of that tradition, because we're going to break it down kind of like we did last week, we got to take this in more obtainable sized bites here, more edible sized bites. We can't just go after this whole thing. This is an elephant that we're trying to eat here. We got to just go, one bite at a time. So first off, before we go any further, we got to have the God disclaimer. Got to, because, we got capital G's, we got capital H's, all in the writing of this tradition. And as we talked about before on this podcast, that can be a scary, scary thing. That word God, for a lot of us, myself included, when I ventured into recovery, was the ultimate turnoff. That scared the hell out of me. But as I always say, recovery is not religious, but it is spiritual. So if you see that word God and it just makes you go, yeah, there are so many things that we can put instead of that. You can have good orderly direction. You could have group of drug addicts. You could have, as I do, and I just change it to higher power. In my mind, I don't have the capital H on here, even how I wrote it in my notes here. I don't capitalize the he or himself, because to me, as we talked about before with higher power, that puts confines and constraints on the element of a higher power that I don't want to do. If you haven't, if you're scared about this whole element of God, I highly suggest going back and listening to episode 2 and then episode 3 of the Clean and Filthy podcast, because we really get into this concept of a higher power and the fear associated with the word God. We go through a lot of that in those episodes. So if you're still struggling with that a little bit, I highly suggest checking out those episodes. They for me personally, were huge growth and have allowed me to be able to, when I see the word God, I don't start feeling some kind of way about it. Instead, I'm able to, automatically shift my thought process from that religious sky daddy type of vibe over to whatever this power is that's loving and caring and greater than myself and helps me stay clean. So we have to put that God disclaimer in there anytime and every time that we got capital G's and capital H's, because I know that is a point of difficulty, a sticking point, a point of contention, if you will, for a lot of people when they get into recovery. So now that we got that out of the way, let's look at what does Tradition 2 really do. Well, it says that Tradition 2 is an example of protecting ourselves from ourselves. It assures us that the fellowship will always be there for us no matter what. No matter, the different personalities or people that are within any group within a fellowship, it assures us that the fellowship will always be there. So we got to look at what group conscience is, because that's a pretty important part right in there. So group conscience, the actual definition of group conscience says that it is the collective conscience of the group's members, representing substantial unanimity on issues involving the group before definitive action is taken. So without looking at the group conscience, we just got to look at conscience. And conscience means to know within oneself. And now this can be very difficult for a lot of us when we first get into recovery. Most of us don't really have a conscience. We don't really know who we are. We don't understand what our morals are or our values or the things that we hold in any kind of esteem. We don't really know what that looks like. So when we first get into the rooms, it can be a very weird type of vibe. It can be very odd to not really know what our conscience is, what feels right to us. So being open-minded and willing to look at others' points of view is very, very important. It's very important to start developing the foundation for what our conscience becomes and how it starts to grow and how it starts to take shape, if you will. But again, it's a process of developing that for a lot of us. Some people know exactly what their conscience is, coming into recovery. They know what their morals are. They know what their values are. They know where they stand within things. But for a lot of us, we don't. But at the end, the group conscience is how home groups or subcommittees within service operate. That is how a fellowship operates, is by group conscience. From things such as how specific meetings are formatted, to if that meeting has coffee, to how the chairs are set up, to how business meetings are conducted. Those are all things that are decided based on group conscience. And it allows, a group to develop, as it does, our personal conscience allows us to develop an identity and values. Group conscience allows a group to do the same thing, whether it be a home group, whether it be a subcommittee for area, for region, for world, whatever that is. Group conscience is what allows things to develop that sense of identity. And one of the quotes that I love, it says, "We can't measure group conscience. We just feel it." And that's a very truthful thing, because there's no way to directly, quantitatively, say, okay, well, this is showing group conscience. We have this much group conscience. It's 92% group conscience. There's no way to do that. But when a group is operating based on the group conscience, there is a feeling within it. I can say that personally. So how do you come to group conscience? Whether it be at a business meeting or at a subcommittee meeting or within the fellowship as a whole? Well, usually there's going to be discussion on the specific topic, whether it's something as simple as, do we want to serve coffee at this meeting? All right, well, let's have a discussion about it. And let's look at the pros and let's look at the cons. And then that's followed by a vote. But the group conscience isn't just the vote. The vote isn't just group conscience goes a lot further than that. That's one of the ways that we help, figure out the group conscience, but it is not strictly the only way of group conscience. And this can be done, through consensus base. Some home groups work off of what's called Robert's Rules of Order, which are just different ways that the group itself, is able to be run, if you will. So the group conscience, at the end of the day, the point of group conscience, and why it mentions God, and in that writing of the tradition, is that the group conscience is how our higher power shows itself within the group. And it says in the literature, it says, when we listen for a higher power in our decision making, our decisions improve. But it can be hard to hear a loving God if we aren't being loving to ourselves, if we aren't being loving to each other. So being open-minded and being empathetic of other people, and we'll get into that a little bit further when we discuss, the actual personalities, and rather that are, the personalities that sometimes come out instead of principles. We'll discuss that a little bit further on here. But when those things come up, we have to remind ourselves that we are trying to let our higher power work through us. That is the point of having the word God in the tradition itself. That's why a God of our own understanding is the only point of authority when it comes to a group within the fellowship. It's not about one person, and we'll talk about that a little bit further. So it says in the literature, one way to understand group conscience is as a collective awareness of spiritual principles. And the way that we maintain our group in dignity is through spiritual principles. When we live by principles, not by personalities. You'll hear that in meetings a lot, that we live by principles, not personalities. Because personalities often can overwhelm principles if they're allowed to. Spiritual principles can be a lens for which we examine ideas. When an idea comes up, we can look at it from a spiritual principle perspective instead of from our personality, which is full of opinions or judgments or ego or pride or all these other character defects that don't allow us to properly, look at and investigate a specific idea. And this can be very difficult to separate. It can be very, very difficult to separate. But it says it says in the literature, despite differences of opinion or style, we are united by our love for recovery and our shared sets of responsibility for our primary purpose. And our primary purpose, as I say, is to carry the message to the addict who's still sick and suffering. So within the spiritual principles, within within tradition 2, is it allows all of these different personalities or styles or opinions to still have that one common factor, as we talked about last week in tradition 1, that common factor of unity. That no matter what your background is, no matter what your political leanings, race, religion, creed, whatever, we still have that one unifying factor. And that's a lot of times, especially in the current world, conditions that we're living in, that can be the one thing that holds things together. And often it's forgotten about. Often it's forgotten about because everybody within the world, whether it be political or pandemic or whatever, everybody's on such a heightened defensive stance, myself included, a lot of times, that I'm not used to going for the spiritual option as much as I used to be. My initial reaction is defensive rather than having a spiritual response. And a defensive reaction is not spiritual by nature. So the more that we have the opportunity to try and have that spiritual response and not reaction, it allows us to grow. It allows us to make an effort at unity, to make an effort to be unified. But again, it can be quite difficult. But it says in the literature, it says, the spiritual conscience of a group will never contradict any of our traditions. Because true spiritual principles, not opinions, are never in conflict. And often, something to look back on when there is some type of conflict is is simply principles being shown. Are principles being presented without opinions, without agendas, without defects. And oftentimes, when that's looked at, it's very evident that, in fact, no, it wasn't strictly spiritual principles, because it says in the literature, spiritual principles are never in conflict. But group conscience doesn't occur with ego or agenda or opinions or politics or pride, but with the spiritual alternative. Because as we've talked about before, on episode 6 and episode 7, for every character defect, there is a spiritual opposite. And oftentimes, especially within the traditions, those things can be overlooked or forgotten about. And a lot of times when, us passionate addicts feel passionately about a passionate topic, sometimes those spiritual principles slip away a little bit. And with that, we start acting out in defect, often without even realizing it. So being cognizant of that and remembering the spiritual alternative when our ego pops up or when we're trying to push our agenda a little bit, remembering that allows us to act spiritually and therefore unified. And if we're acting from a unified perspective, things are actually going to get done. We're going to develop a group conscience that we all feel good about. It says that regardless of personality or opinion, each of us has a part of group conscience. And now that being said, that doesn't mean that what I want is going to be the group conscience. I'm going through that currently within my home group. And that's okay. That's okay, because the group conscience is all of the sum of all of our parts. It's not my opinion. It's not my conscience. It's everybody's conscience. And it's everybody's higher power working through each other. That's how a group conscience comes together. But like I said, that doesn't mean that we're always gonna be in agreement. But one of the things that I love, and it says and part of the reason why group conscience is so important to me is it says carrying out a group conscience is a selfless act and a spiritual exercise, even if it doesn't fit our opinion. Honestly, I would say especially when it doesn't fit our opinion. Because when we get out of the way and we speak for that group or that subcommittee or that service body, it says that we begin to experience what it can be like to let a higher power work through us. And that is difficult at times. When it says that it's a spiritual exercise, that's not a lie. To be holding a group conscience for something that I don't like from my opinion side, not from anything other than my opinion side. That can be a very difficult spiritual exercise. But as it says in the literature, that's how we grow, is by approaching these things that maybe we don't like and walking through them. And that's literally something that's been going on in my home group personally with this, reopening post-COVID or during COVID, or how are we doing that safely? How are we doing that from a unified perspective? And how are we keeping the personalities out of it? How are we keeping people's opinions out of it while still carrying the group conscience? And, it says, we will not always get our way, and letting go can be a struggle. But the second tradition asks us to let go of self-obsession and desire to control. Let go of those character defects. Embrace the spiritual alternatives, even when we don't want to. Because as a member of a 12-step fellowship, group conscience is how our higher power works. It's how our higher power comes through. So if I'm not carrying the group conscience because it's opposed to my opinion, then I'm living in self-will. I'm not living in my higher power's will.
That part.
And sometimes I have to remind myself of that. Sometimes I have to remind myself that, no, they're wrong. Because my brain says they're wrong, I'm right. Control, self-obsession, character defect. I don't want to live in character defect. And those are the times that character defects come up that is a little more sneaky. We've talked about this before. I know my glaring, blatantly clear character defects. I know them. But those other ones that subtly just go, boop, 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 hi, I'm here. Or don't say, hi, I'm here, but start impacting my thoughts and my words and my actions. And that is a scary place. That is a slippery slope for an addict like me. Because then I will start forming judgments. I'll start forming resentments. I'll start buying into the group talk of, man, fuck that guy, he's a moron. When my opinions take over, I'm not living in my higher power's will. I'm not living spiritually. I'm taking my will back, sometimes without even realizing it. So the quote that sums up group conscience to me that I love, it says, the group becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Forming up like Voltron, because everybody's good in their own way, come together, boom, taken over. That is the essence of group conscience, is it allows for all perspectives to grow together. So now we got to get into the trusted servants part. It says, our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. So it says in the literature, it says, being a trusted servant goes against everything addiction demands of us. This is one reason why being of service is such a powerful part of recovery. Because I know, for me personally, I couldn't be trusted. And I damn sure wasn't a servant to anything other than my addiction. But now, because of recovery, because of working a 12-step recovery program, I'm able to be trusted. And I'm able to help serve the fellowship. That's a big thing for me. And that's why the fellowships don't have roles or titles like king or emperor or queen or prime minister or almighty one or holy one or director or ruler. We aren't masters here, though I am a master debater. You get it? Master debater. All right, anyway. Sorry. I'm such a child sometimes.
That part.
But we have, service positions such as secretary or treasurer or chair or group representative, because those titles are ones that imply service rather than control. And leadership in the fellowship is never from a place of authority. Because when we are leading, we are servants of our higher power's will, and aligning the group's will with, that of our higher power is how we carry group conscience. And how we do this will be, this, with so many different members and higher powers and perspectives, it can be difficult. But the beautiful thing within the second tradition is that it allows us to do this by holding a space for the brilliance of others, by listening, by not judging, by not making snap decisions, by being open-minded to new ideas, even when we are incredibly set in our personal ideas. Those are all ways that we can align the collective will with the collective higher power's will. And that's why I hate the political side of recovery. Because an atmosphere of recovery in our groups is one of the most valued assets, and we must guard it carefully, lest we lose it to politics or personalities. That's a direct quote from the literature. But politics do happen, often without unspiritual beginnings. I've seen it happen plenty of times, especially, with home groups or service committees that have members with substantial clean time, and also members who don't have as much clean time or as much understanding of group conscience. And immediately you hear somebody speaking with 30 years, and subconsciously you almost go, well, they must know what they're talking about, so I'm going to vibe with whatever they do, whatever they say. When maybe their perspective isn't a spiritual one, but subconsciously and unintentionally, because of them being somewhat intimidating, now other people fall in line. And we don't want that. People's personal perspective on, what drives a specific issue can lead to an unspiritual result. It says in the literature, it says, our perspectives shape our perspective. Our perspectives shape our perception, and our perception helps determine our experience. And that's why looking at things empathetically from a different perspective is vital. Even when it's, from a perspective of somebody that I don't really want to look at that. When it goes opposed to my perspective. Because I can still get high and mighty about my perspective. I can still get high and mighty about what I think is right. As we talked about, self-righteousness. I can still get a little self-righteous. But when we can approach things with the spiritual principle of empathy, when we can approach things from a different perspective than we ever have before, it allows us to possibly see things we never would have seen. And sometimes, that could be politics when there's not an unspiritual perspective on it. But there could also be politics with an unspiritual, beginning. That just feels so unspiritual to me. I mean, I literally have gotten phone calls from people trying to lobby me on a vote, like trying to sway my vote to their side. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have discussions, because discussions are how I can understand other perspectives. Discussions, especially on topics that I feel strongly one way or another about, if I actually open my mind, open my ears, and listen compassionately to somebody else's perspective, I might be able to grow. And one of the greatest ways that we can grow is when new information is presented and we understand that, I was wrong. That perspective is actually a better one. That is a better way to carry our group conscience. But there's a difference between having a discussion and having somebody calling to politic and lobby for votes. And that to me just feels gross. I've had it happen a couple times and it just feels gross to me. And oftentimes makes me want to vote the opposite of what that person was saying, just out of character defect spite. Just be like, you're trying to do something unspiritual, so I'm going to go unspiritual too. We're going to discuss not needing to do that anymore further on, a little bit later here. But this is why, we want to make sure to separate the idea from the person. And this is something that is so difficult to do, because I know I have been guilty of this. When an idea comes up from a person that maybe is not one of my favorite people, I love them, but maybe I don't like them too much. In my mind, I make that snap judgment of, nah, I'm not even going to listen to what they say. Counterpoint, when somebody that I'm really close to in the fellowship, one of my, really close friends makes a motion or says something, that immediate unconscious response is, oh yeah, I like that. Even when it doesn't line up with what I actually like. And then I have to start looking at the spiritual principles within it and say, okay, I get that was my initial reaction, but is that actually what my conscience says? And if so, is that actually, what I feel the group conscience should be? So being able to separate an idea or a motion or a comment from the person who made it can be absolutely vital when it comes to things within the service structure. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy. I can say that personally when I've been in business meetings, part of group chats, and I'm like, somebody says something, and next thing you know, 3 or 4 of us are responding to each other in the group chat because it was that person who said it. Maybe if I would have said it, another group chat of some other people would have been popping up about it. But we don't have to do that when we remember to live by spiritual principles. Again, it's not always easy, but it is imperative to do that. Because it says in the literature, it says, our experience shows that if a group becomes an extension of a person or of the personality of a leader or member, it loses its effectiveness. And that happens. There are certain sponsorship trees and, every region that you go to that, get into places of service within a bunch of subcommittees and can push an agenda. And again, I'm not saying that was an unspiritual, start. Maybe they were just being of service, but because they all shared their same kind of thought process, that's what it led to. And that, as that quote just said, will lose its effectiveness, because then it starts looking like a dictatorship or some type of government or this sponsorship tree's running things. No, none of us are ever running anything. The only thing that's running any element of service, any group conscience, is our higher power. So that's why when people say to me like, oh, I love your meeting. I've been sharing meetings since as soon as I was able to. When I had 4 months clean, I picked up a service commitment to chair a meeting. And for the last 3 years, there's been maybe 2 months that I wasn't chairing a meeting because I like chairing a meeting. I'm an excitable type of person. I'm a loud type of person. I'm a boisterous type of person, especially when I get some yeet juice in my body. Yeet juice is Bang Energy. Sponsor me, please. Shout out. But that's what I am. I like that I have excitement and joy and emotion and energy for recovery. I like being able to do that, but it's not my meeting. It's not my meeting. It's not my service position. It's not my subcommittee. It's not anything like that. It is simply a meeting that I am being of service to by chairing. Because feelings of importance, they can cloud that anonymity. They can cloud anonymity. And we start to feel like the fellowship needs me more than I need the fellowship. I've heard people say that in the past, like, yeah, that's my meeting. Oh, the reason why that meeting was good was because I was sharing it. I said that shit in the beginning because my ego was still, wrapped up in what other people thought of me. So when somebody would say that, it would be like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, my meeting's the best meeting, man. Nah. We don't need to live that way anymore. Because I have worked a true 6th step and a true 7th step. I can see that that is a character defect coming out that I don't have to live within. So now when somebody says something like that, it actually like makes me feel kind of like, nah. And I'll actually say like, no, that's not my meeting. I just share it. But I'm glad you like it. Because at the end of the day, all I can do is lead by example. And hopefully somebody else likes it, likes my energy, whatever, so then they want to do the same thing. And being of service is just how I give back what was so freely given to me. So I'm glad that somebody enjoys a meeting that I chair or enjoys my energy with whatever, but it's not my meeting. It's nobody's meeting. It's nobody's service position. It's nobody's, a governing place. No kings, no queens. There's no big I's and little U's in recovery. It's one of the quotes you'll hear from most, old timers say stuff like that. Because not any one of us is more important than anyone else, regardless of what level of service work you do on what regional committee or what world board. Nah, none of that matters. Because at the end of the day, we are all just addicts in recovery. That's it. There's nothing else to it. So I'm going to close with this quote, and it says that tradition 2 tells us it is possible to recover together in unity, carrying a message and fulfilling service obligations because we are united under an ultimate authority. That is tradition 2 right there. That is tradition 2. We carry our group conscience because of a loving and caring higher power. And that's how we all work together on it. So that is what we got for tradition 2. Hopefully that, made some sense. Hopefully that gives a little bit more information. Like I said, traditions are like graduate level recovery type stuff. I can't even imagine once we get into the concepts. That's like post-doctorate type. I don't even know. We'll get there when we get there, because that day that we get in there is not today. So hopefully that, made some sense. We're going to be back next week with tradition number 3. And so that's what we have for our first segment of recovery and development. All right, so next segment, we're getting into my favorite moment of the week. Now, this is part of the show where we talk about something over the past week and why it was my favorite moment. Now, as we've said before, this is kind of like a week wrap-up of my favorite moments. So we're talking about things that I liked, things that, from pop culture, news, sports, social media. Might just be my favorite, meme on Instagram. Still not watching TikTok, but I'm still not on TikTok, but, still watching them, so keep them coming. So this is strictly my opinion. I mean, I tie stuff into how it affects me, but I'm not speaking from a point of authority on anything about this. This is just my opinion. Okay? Cool. So, first thing, I got to clarify something from last week. I went on a little bit of a rant about how saying, something sucks dick is homophobic, where I actually want to clarify that, because really what it is it's sexist. It's sexist and like straight, male focused, because the fact that, that because something isn't pleasurable from my perspective, that is being used to be a negative, and it's used by all races and all genders, is just weird. And that just speaks to being so just straight white male pushed. Maybe not white, but straight male pushed, which ties into something that Joe Rogan just recently said about, I'm not even going to get into it. That whole rant was just like, whatever. So had to clarify that. So again, I mean, while the statement has some potential homophobic undertones to it. It's also just incredibly sexist and from a very narrow lens of a straight male. I'm going to just try to stop saying it. Again, things that are bad for me bite balls.
That part.
Ball biting. Again, no offense to anybody who likes biting balls. I mean, do what you got to do. It's cool. Next, we got to talk about chest day. I said last week I was excited and nervous and scared to go to the gym, go to chest. Yes, had my first chest day back in the gym, and I am very happy to report that I was able to still rep 135. So I didn't quit the gym. In fact, I actually put up one at 225. It was a very weak rep, but I did it. It's nothing like the 255 I previously had been putting up, but whatever. First time back in 15 months, I'm happy with it. I'm really excited because I just got confirmation that I am going to be on a fellow recovery podcaster's podcast next week. I'm going to be on the Mr. Stutz podcast, so shout out to Mr. Stutz. I'll be getting all the information for that. I'll put it into the description when that happens. So check out all the social media to make sure that that you are able to check that out. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to have a good vibe. So also got to give a big shout out to the NBA Hall of Fame ceremony. Shout out to KG, still one of my favorite big men of all time. Shout out to Tim Duncan, who I have always hated. I've always despised him because he was a Spur and he was so good and he was the big fundamental. Always hated him, but shout out to his induction speech. And there's something about him with locks. It's a different vibe. Like, I feel like I can never like the old Tim Duncan, but the new Tim Duncan, who's rocking the grayish locks, I think I can like him. I'm not sure because he's still, Spur tie, but I don't know. Got to give a shout out to two of my favorite people from the journalistic sports world. Michael Wilbon, always loved you on PTI. You're a great writer, even though I don't like some of your opinions still. And also Mike Breen, one of the best play-by-play announcers. Also, speaking of announcers, Marv Albert's retiring. If you've ever watched basketball, you have heard Marv Albert, one of the greatest, broadcasters. Also, he's got some other off the court issues, but great broadcaster. But the moment of the Hall of Fame, as much as, Kim Mulkey's speech was awesome and Rudy Tomjanovich, but I mean, it was Kobe Bryant. It was Kobe Bryant having Jordan up there on stage with Vanessa Bryant coming out, and I don't even know how she did that. I can't fathom being up there, the widow of a 10-year plus relationship, and having lost your significant other or your spouse and your child, and then be able to get up there and gave a good speech. I love the fact that the TV censors weren't ready. I was watching it live, so I got to see the unbleeped version. I thought that was pretty cool. And just shout out to everybody, but also, to Vanessa Bryant for holding it together. I can't imagine it. I didn't watch them, but I got to give a shout out to Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision winning multiple MTV awards. It's so weird. I used to love the MTV awards so much. That used to be my vibe. I was all about the MTV awards. And anymore, I don't know if it's growth or what, but I'm just like, I don't care. Whatever. Like, that used to be my thing. It was like, oh, shit, the MTV awards, yo, we got to be home, got to be what? Now I'm just like, I saw the results of it afterwards. Like, whatever. Happy moment. I went to my second in-person meeting and felt a lot better, felt comfortable, felt good being back in my home group. Pretty much the exact opposite of what I had felt after my first meeting, so hooray for that. Have to give a shout out to Jermaine Cole, Mr. J. Cole, for the off season. It did not disappoint. The first song, 95 South, has the greatest unexpected guest of Cameron. It took me back to early 2000s. I was vibing with it. My favorite song were probably either Pride is the Devil or Hunger on the Hillside. But can we just have a discussion? Why does J. Cole like 21 Savage so much? Like, he always gives him shout outs and even put him on the album with the remake of Pharoah Monch's My Life. And it was not the vibe. Like, I liked everything about that song except for 21 Savage. 21, 21, 21, 21, 21. Sending teddy bears, 21. The fuck is that? I don't know. Sorry, I'm not a fan. Not a fan, never will be. Moving on. UFC 262. Congrats, Charles Oliveira. Really thought Michael Chandler was going to win. That's all I got to say about that because I didn't get to watch it live. I only got to watch it through people tweeting about it. So thank you for everybody posting clips on Twitter. Y'all the real MVPs. Pretty excited. NBA playoffs are almost set. We got the play-in games, and then we're going to be good. Pretty scary as a Suns fan to have either the Lakers fully healthy or Golden State Warriors with Chef Steph cooking, like playing his best basketball, and I can't think of how long, and that's scary regardless, but we'll see what happens. Also, shout out Monty Williams winning NBA Coach of the Year. We're going to talk about some Suns a little bit further. Also, I got to give a shout out to my homegirl, Kate. She put this quote up, and this quote, I felt this. It says, someone trying to hurt me by bringing up my past is like trying to rob my old house. I don't live there anymore.
That part.
I like that. I like that a lot because there's still instances in life where people will try to bring up my past to throw it in my face. But it's okay because I don't live there anymore. I'm not that same person. So that was fire. But my actual favorite moment of the week, I'm going to give a little background and then we're going to get into the actual moment. But my favorite moment of the week, I watched this movie by Lars von Trier called The House That Jack Built. Now, anybody who knows anything about Lars von Trier knows this dude is nuts. For anybody who doesn't know, he's a Danish film director, known to be incredibly difficult to work with, very eccentric. Many of his actors refuse to ever work with him again after being on set. He's got this thing called the Dogma 95 doctrine where he focuses on like straightforward content, realism, not using technology, not using special effects or CGI to like push the narrative, push the story. He refuses to fly. He won't come to the U.S., not just because he refuses to fly, but also because he is so opposed to the U.S. He's won at the Cannes Film Festival, the Palme d'Or. Always is like, he's pretty much like the king of Cannes, even when he was blackballed from it for 7 years or blacklisted from it. He's had Academy Award winning actors and actresses in his movies. He has really bad OCD, really bad anxiety. He's an alcohol addict, struggles with depression. He got really popular recently because of Nymphomaniac 1 and 2, which were definitely an interesting movie, I'll say that. And also for like Antichrist, for Breaking the Waves, for Dancer in the Dark and Melancholia. Those are like his biggest, most well-known films. And he's been directing for 50 years. He's an incredible director. And the cinematography and it was the type of movie I like. A lot of people won't like these type of movies because they're not like, these are very much like art house type of movies. These are like, like focus feature type of films, very, very focused on these teeny tiny little details that, maybe don't mean anything or maybe mean everything. And you need to interpret, what does this mean? And what does this mean? And how does this work? And so there was some very impressive and enjoyable elements within it. Even though the movie was about a serial killer with OCD, played by Matt Dillon. The story of the film was inspired by Dante's Inferno, which became very apparent towards the end of it. But this movie was one that really, it's probably going to be his last feature film. He said that he's just not healthy enough to be on set anymore. He might do, short films or something, but he's not, because of his OCD and his anxiety and his depression and his copious amount of drinking, he's just not comfortable or capable of being on set. But this movie was, just one of the most violent things I've ever seen from a wide release movie. Not something, like a Serbian film or like some specifically gore type of movie like Hostel. Like this was a real, mainstream, well, maybe not mainstream, but real movie. Not like a niche, like trying to be over the top type of movie. This was a pretty, straightforward movie. And it split the critics pretty intently. That wouldn't work there. It split the critics very divisively. You had one group that were saying, this was incredible, this was a masterpiece, it's so on the, on target and such a great, discussion of the current state of filmmaking and this and that. And then you had other ones who were saying this was essentially murder porn. Apparently, like 100 people walked out of the premiere at Cannes. It was incredibly brutal. Probably the most brutal mainstream movie I've ever seen. Again, not comparing it to Hostel or a Serbian film or, Green Inferno or one of those type that is made to be it's made to be murder porn. This isn't supposed to be like that. And there were some elements that were really well done with the directing and elements. I mean, Matt Dillon did a great job. And there were elements that I really appreciated within it. But the most interesting thing for me, and this also speaks to how desensitized, me personally, as an American film viewer or media consumer is that the entire movie was filled with brutal murders. Like murders, abusive corpses, like dismembering, disgustingly gory, horrible type of stuff. Like at one point, literally, spoiler alert, he builds a fucking house out of corpses. Hence, the name, the house that Jack built, which was an interesting build-up through the movie. I will say that. But the fucking shock of seeing a house built out of human beings is like, bruh. But that wasn't the shocking thing to me. It was really interesting. And this was something that I had to look back on. I was like, whoa. But the even with all of the violence towards, women and children and men and just copious violence, the one thing that really was like, was like the one moment of violence that was like too much in terms of direct violence was a scene of animal violence, which is really weird. Why, as a non-hunting human being, I value animals above human beings when it comes to like directly killing and I don't know, it's weird. That's something else that I need to look at. But the scene that got me the most, and he even admitted, this is the type of movie that he wants to make people look away. The only scene throughout murder upon murder upon murder upon murder that actually made me feel icky, the only scene that I felt, I can't believe I'm watching this, was a scene that had incredible verbal abuse and psychological abuse. And it was really weird because it gave me an opportunity to see growth. Because I know for me personally, I can tell you, that in my active addiction, there were times that I was very verbally abusive. That I would live in anger, that I would live in defect, that I would live in selfishness, that I didn't feel, I wouldn't have felt any kind of way about seeing the scene. Because it was what I was used to. It was what I was doing. And I'm not saying I was always verbally abusing people. I'm not saying I was always, using derogatory terms towards people or insulting people's intelligence. I'm not saying I always did that, but there were times I did. And there were times that I did like that. That would be how I would react. I wouldn't respond. I would react completely unspiritually. And so watching this scene, for the first time that I can remember since being in recovery, I felt like, like I can't watch this. Like, this is so disrespectful. And this is so just unabashed cruelty to this character. And it's just weird that in a movie full of murderous murder and murdering of murder, that was the thing that made me just, but it shows growth. And that is one of the coolest things about recovery. I always talk about that the longer I'm clean, the more I have opportunities to see growth. And this is an opportunity to see my growth that I would not have even realized. This came up because of seeing this scene in a movie. And that was so exciting to me to see that and to have further confirmation that I don't need to bring myself down to that level. I'm not saying it doesn't still happen. It happens very, very, infrequently compared to how it used to, but there still can be those times. But I don't have to do that anymore because I have a spiritual alternative. I don't need to stoop down to anybody else's level. And that can be very difficult with certain people in certain situations, but I don't have to. And that's an exciting thing. That's an exciting thing because I no longer need to lower myself. If anything, I can try to help other people raise their level of frequency or their level of vibration, not have to live in that unspiritual defect level. And that scene allowed me to see that. So it was a weird way to have my favorite moment of the week. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to present that in this segment, but that's what we got. So that was my favorite moment of the week and my favorite moments of the week. This is, like I said, what we do each week. If you have anything on Instagram, send it over my way. I love, getting interaction with people. I'm going to eventually set up the Discord so we have a one-stop place for all social media stuff and best way to interact. So that is what I have. If you have anything that you want to send over, like TikToks, please make sure to send them to Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com. And we very well might talk about it next week on this part of the segment, of this part of the show. So, next up, it's time to
Ask an Addict with your host, Matthew M.
That's right. This is the part of the show where every week we answer questions. Because I am an addict, the resident addict here on the Clean and Filthy podcast. And this is where we answer viewer-submitted or listener-submitted questions. So if you have a question that you want to have answered on air, you can go directly to the website and send it through the Contact Us page, or send it to Matthew at CleanAndFilthyPodcast.com, or send it on any social media. I post these questions out every week, and, people respond through that. So if you have a question, please let me know. Send it over. We will, possibly answer it on air. So first question I had, I've been talking about the gym a lot. I've been excited about getting back. Question was, what is my favorite day to work out? So currently, I'm only working out 3 days a week. I'm trying to figure out how my workout schedule is going to work with, I used to work out 6 days a week. That was before I had my son as often as I do now. So now that I have him more often, I'm trying to figure out exactly how it's going to look. And I'm trying to ease myself back into it. I'm not trying to go in too hard.
Phrasing?
Back into the gym too rigorously. Better. Right off the bat. Because I used to work out 6 days a week. I used to do, push, pull, legs, split. So I would do each one of those, twice a week. So now I'm just simply doing push on one day, which push is chest, shoulders, and triceps. I'm doing pull on one day, which is back and biceps, and then legs on one day. So just working out 3 days a week. Sometimes I'll do cardio and abs. I need to do more cardio and abs because really need to do more cardio and abs. But I would say for one specific body part or even for one specific day, my favorite day would be push. And if we have to say one specific part, that would be chest. And if we had to say one specific lift, it's either going to be flat bench or the decline machine. Because when you can put a bunch of weight on things, it feels good. My ego gets fed when I can get up there and get that song going in my head. It's funny. I still have one specific song that I always listen to every time I'm trying to max out. And I got to wait for that drop. And it's No Problem by Diplo. And it's been the same song for 10 years. And we're going, and we're going, and we're going. And tonight I'm going to do what I want. And that's the vibe. If anybody's ever ever worked out with me, you've seen that in action. So chest is my most fun day. That's when I feel the best. And I can immediately look down and be like, oh, okay. The chesticles are getting a little swole. So I like that. But I also will say that as much as I hate it, I also love it. And that is leg day. Because I never want to lift leg day. Never. Because my ass is always sore. My legs are always sore. I can't walk. And I never like it. I just don't. But then when I'm there, especially on leg press, because leg press is the lift I can lift the most weight on. And being able to load all those plates up on that sled and then just He-Man, caveman type strength to just, there's just something about that's amazing. So I would still say chest is my favorite body part. I would still say push is my favorite day. But when I'm doing it, legs day is pretty nice. Not so nice when I'm thinking about having to do it. But when I get there and I get it, then it's a lot better. I'll say that. So that's what we have for the first question. Next question. It says, are there resources for families of addicts? And now this is a great question, and this is something that is so important, because we do have so many people within our listeners and viewership that aren't addicts, that are not directly in recovery, but they maybe know somebody or somebody who's going through something. And there are many options. The first two that are the biggest ones are Nar-Anon and Al-Anon. And those are specifically for family members or significant others to an addict. That's the point of them. And it's really cool because they're set up the same type of way. You work with a sponsor. You work through steps. It's very much, 12-step recovery, just not for a, substance. And I've seen massive, success for family members within this. I've spoken at a meeting that was actually started by the father of one of my really good friends in recovery. And it was so cool seeing a different perspective from the typical addict perspective. It was beautiful, because their questions and their, understanding is so different, but they, it's almost like they understand little elements of it, but they've never personally felt it. They've never personally gone through what I've gone through. They've gone through, a lot of the same journey of being in the wake of destruction for somebody, but they've never gone through that exact thing. So it's really interesting to hear a different perspective, and it's really interesting, to be able to feel like you're carrying a message in a different way, but with still the same goal. So I would definitely recommend anybody who, has a family member who's in recovery, being able to have something to help support them is a beautiful thing. I will always say support is one of the most vital aspects for us addicts, having support. And a lot of times it comes, later from family members, because oftentimes family members or significant others are the people that we hurt the most in active addiction. So a lot of times they can be some of the last to come around, and that's okay. But one of the greatest ways to help people, that have been hurt is to do the same thing that us addicts do, is to go to a 12-step meeting specifically set up to deal with those type of things, to deal with the ramifications of being a significant other or a family member to an addict. So those are great options. And I highly recommend them. If you want more information about how to get to one of the, either Nar-Anon, Al-Anon type of meetings, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to get that information to you, as I've seen great success from it. And another thing that can be done is to, go along with, that member. Go along with that member to a regular meeting. Like if somebody, if I was dating a normie who doesn't understand anything about recovery, I'd say, let's go to a meeting. Come check it out. Because as we talked about before, an open meeting is open to addicts and anybody. So I remember back in the day, especially at my home group, there would be a group of support people that would come and support. And that's a beautiful thing. Like I said, support is so vital for us addicts. It really is. So that is one of the options. That's two of the options that you can look into. I know there's plenty of other things. There are therapists specifically tied into recovery. So there could be, recovery therapist, marriage counselor type things. I mean, there are a lot of other types of options, but the two most obvious are Nar-Anon and Al-Anon, or just go to meetings with that person as well. So next question, and I love this question. And this came from one of my buddies. He's a big Suns fan as well. Suns being in the playoffs, first time in 10 years, as we talked about a few episodes back. He hit me up with the question. He said, what would be your Suns' top 5 players in history? So I changed it a little bit. And I said, let's change it to my starting 5. What would be my top Suns starting 5 in history? Now, got to put some caveats in here. We aren't talking about players who were amazing for their entire career and then came to the Suns for a season. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people within the Suns organization who excelled as a Phoenix Sun. So, I mean, obviously, if we were doing it based on players in general, it would be like Shaq, Vince Carter, Grant Hill, Penny Hardaway, whatever. We aren't doing that because all those players, did not have their best years as Suns, period. So we're looking specifically, for players within their tenure for the Phoenix Suns. And I'm going to admit, it's my top five. It's my starting five, so I'm doing what I want. I'm making it like an all-star game, and we might be shifting players' positions just a little bit. Power forwards might become centers. Shooting guards might become, point guards. That's just what we're doing. A couple of these were more difficult than I thought. So here we go. Starting five. First off, point guard. No brainer. Steve Nash. Steve Nash, 5-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA team, 5-time NBA assist leader, 2-time MVP, possibly the best player in Suns history. Now, all of these accolades that I'm reading are during their tenure with the Suns. So don't listen to this and then at me like, hey, bro, you were wrong. He actually was an all-star for this many years. I get that. But I'm only mentioning their all-stars or all-NBA teams with the Suns. Okay, don't at me, bro. Or if you're going to at me, at least share it as well. Next up, shooting guard. Okay. Kevin Johnson is a very good option. But then we also got Devin Booker. Kevin Johnson, ferocious competitor. I would say more so than Booker. Kevin Johnson was one of the scrappiest dudes. There's so much about Chris Paul that reminds me of Kevin Johnson. 3-time NBA All-Star, 3-time All-NBA team. But I got to say, as a prisoner of the moment, I'm going with Book. I'm going with Devin Booker. Because the dude dropped 70 points in a game, bruh. He's, for a shooting guard, I think his chemistry with Nash would be better than Nash and Kevin Johnson. So I'm going Booker. Even though he's only a 2-time All-Star, he's still young. He got time. All right, power forward. I'm going out of order here, but you'll see why. Power forward, got to be the round mound rebound. How can it not be? I mean, come on. Charles Barkley, period. 4-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, MVP, All-Star Game MVP in his 4 years with the Suns. Led the Suns to the finals, something Nash never did. To me, that's just a no-brainer. He has to be. Okay. Center. We're shifting positions here a little bit. We're putting Amari Stoudemire as a center. 5-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, one of the most ferocious dunkers since Sean Kemp. I loved Amari. I really did. He's one of those that just what he could have been. And we talked about it on the episode where we, a few weeks ago, and it's sad, but still, if in my categorization for this is starting five at their prime, I'm taking Amari at center. Sure, he's not a true center. Whatever. He can still run a pick and roll and absolutely obliterate a dude at the rim. So that's what we're going with. Now we get to small forward. And now this is where it got a little more difficult. Because on one hand, you got Sean Marion, who one of the greatest Suns players. And very possibly, top 5 player in Suns history. But then you also got Tom Chambers. So Marion, 4-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA. He's the top player in Suns history for win shares with 93.1%. I don't 100% understand what win shares means. Some smarter than me algorithm type thing from these super analytical type people that get into all of the plus and minus differential of this and that. All I know is it's the best in Suns history. But Chambers, 4-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, just like Marion. But he really came alive in the playoffs. And he had that next gear. Plus, the defining thing here is he helped the Suns make the finals. So I'm going to go with Chambers. And I didn't know until this moment who I was going to go with. I was so conflicted, writing that out. I was so conflicted. I didn't know who I was going to go with. But we're going with Tom Chambers there. Also, the fact that he's, part of the Suns post-game show on local, Fox Sports Arizona, he's always a lot of fun. So we're going with Tom Chambers. So we are going for our starting five. We've got Steve Nash at point guard. We got Devin Booker at shooting guard. We got Charles Barkley at power forward. We got Tom Chambers at small forward. And we got Amari Stoudemire at center. But I couldn't stop there because we had to have a sixth man, right? Got to have a sixth man. So are we gonna go with Dan Marley or Paul Westphal? Now, a lot of people that aren't big Suns fans really only remember Paul Westphal from his days of being a coach. And, well, now Dan Marley was also a coach at Grand Canyon. But both of these dudes were ballers. Marley, 3-time All-Star, 2-time All-Defensive Player. One of the coolest dudes I've ever met. This dude's hands are like monstrous. They just like envelop your hand. I shook his hand and it was like, I felt like I had baby hands. It was crazy. Really cool dude. One of the nicest guys I met. Helped lead the Suns to the finals. But Paul Westphal was a 4-time All-Star and 4-time All-NBA team, and he had amazing versatility, more so than Marley did. So I think this is another one on the spot. I'm going with Dan Marley. No, I'm going with Dan Marley. I'm just going with Thunder Dan. That whole run towards the finals, I'm going with Thunder Dan. Also got to give honorable mention shout-outs to Raja Bell, who was one of the scrappiest dudes ever to play for the Suns. I love that dude. His moment with Kobe in the Western Conference Finals will go down in Suns lore. It was amazing, and I'm sorry, I still think even with Kobe's passing, RIP, I still think that we can appreciate that moment because it was incredible. Also, Leandro Barbosa, he was one of the streakiest, fastest, most out-of-control type of dudes ever, but he was so exciting to watch, so I always really liked him. And then also, gave him a shout-out before on the last Suns episode, but Eddie House, my Sun Devil brethren, loved Eddie House. I mean, he was only with us for a season, so there's no way I could put him on there. But I loved him. Same thing with Chris Paul. Chris Paul's been amazing over this last season, and he very well could be on this list if he plays long enough. But as of right now, those are just honorable mentions. I need more than a season. So that's what we got for this week of Ask an Addict. If you've got any questions that you would like to have answered on air, like I said, send them over and we will answer them on air. It's, again, a lot of my opinion here, but I just like answering questions. I don't know why. Maybe it makes me feel important. Maybe it's a character defect. I haven't figured that out yet, so because I haven't, keep sending me questions. Awesome. All right, well, we are almost out of time. But, we can't close up an episode without giving them clean time shout-outs. This is the time of the show where we recognize members who have achieved various lengths of continuous clean time. And these are the universally recognized milestones of newcomer, which is anybody with 29 days or less, 30 days clean, 60 days clean, 90 days clean, 6 months clean, 9 months clean, 1 whole year clean, 18 months clean, and multiple years clean. Also, here on the show, we like to recognize various large numbers. So if you've got 100 days, 500 days, 1,000 days, 10,000 days, send them over so we can give you a clean time shout out. So everybody knows and doesn't get scared. When we got those 1+ years, we give them books for each year. So be fair warned. First and foremost, we've got 2 newcomers again. I'm glad you guys are here. We've got Lauren as a newcomer, 29 days or less. Well done. And we've got Kimberly with 29 days or less. Well done. Well done. Next up, we've got Matthew, great name, bro, with 90 days clean. Well done. Hell yeah. Next, with 9 months, we've got Bree. Awesome. Good job. And we've got, with 9 months, we've got Angelica. Well done. And we got my sponsee, Rhodey, with them 9 months. You get that 3/4 of a boop. Next up, we got my boy Alex with 6 years clean. Boop, 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 boop. Well done. Reload. Because now we also got my homegirl Jasmine out in Vegas with 6 years clean. Well done. Then staying out in Vegas, we got my boy Selwyn with 11 years. There we go. And finally, all the way in Florida, we've got Cindy with 11 years. That's how we doing it in here, baby. I love that clean time. Love them clean time shout outs. So if you are celebrating any clean time between now and next week's episode, make sure to send it over to me so we can get you a shout out on air. Again, any of the universally recognized clean time key tags or any big, large numbers, send them over so we can give you a shout out on air because I love doing clean time. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Well, everybody, it is about that time, and we are about at the end of the show. But I just want to say that I love each and every one of you, and I thank everybody for being here. Again, huge shout out to our episode sponsor, Etc. by Emily. And again, big thank you to Valentino Khan, Alice in Wonderland, and Mad Decent Records for allowing us to hear this amazing song as our theme music. You know, I had a great episode today. I hope everybody else enjoyed it. Please like, comment, subscribe, tweet, retweet, follow, share, all of that. And remember, if nobody told you today that they love you, I love each and every one of you. Hope to see all of you back next week, 5 p.m. Tuesday.
I just wanna